Live from the Scripps Studios, this is 10 News.
Small business owners and everyday Americans desperate for a lifeline may have one soon. Good evening, I'm Kimberly Hunt. The White House and lawmakers agreed to another phase of relief funds for millions of Americans. My co-anchor, Steve Atkinson, is following the latest round of stimulus that can't come soon enough. Steve.
Kim, it was just a couple of weeks ago that Congress approved that huge $2 trillion spending package for Americans that were hurting at the time, but many of them never even got to see a dime before that money ran out. Well, the Senate came through today and approved another $480 billion spending package to be used for small businesses, hospitals, and testing. That's good news nationwide. But while we wait on that money, some states are planning on reopening. Here's ABC's Romina Puga.
In Washington, senators from both sides of the aisle striking a deal on a $484 billion plan to help the economy recover, including more money for hospitals and testing.
A lot of money for all of them, especially for our workers and our small businesses.
But some governors were hoping for state relief.
Fund small businesses, fund airlines, but you don't fund police, you don't fund fire, you don't fund healthcare workers, you don't fund teachers, you don't fund schools.
And frustration among some small business owners after an Associated Press investigation reported that at least 75 companies that were helped by the previous relief plan meant for small businesses are so big that they're publicly traded. Some have market values greater than $100 million. Big chains like Ruth's Chris and Shake Shack got money before the pot ran out last week, the latter giving $10 million back to the government after facing outrage.
It's really difficult as a small business person to hear how big corporations are getting grants and they're being given money.
And as America considers its future beyond the pandemic, Chaplain Rocky Walker of Mount Sinai Hospital in New York warns of another kind of wave of suffering.
And that is a wave of depression, exhaustion, and weariness on the part of the healthcare workers themselves.
The key to reopening may be stepped-up testing. A new Harvard study shows the U.S. needs to conduct between 5 and 20 million tests a day. So far, there have only been 4 million tests total. Governor Cuomo saying New York labs are ready and waiting, but he needs the president's help to get them testing supplies.
You shouldn't expect all these governors to go run around and do an international supply chain.
While in Boston, disease detectives hoping to keep the virus in check with contact tracing, a critical tool to stop the spread. 1,000 contact tracers will call anyone who's tested positive so they can alert others who came within 6 feet of them for more than 15 minutes. As the urge to return to normal amplifies, 3 southern states making considerably risky moves to reopen, none of them reporting a steady 2-week decline in cases as the White House guidelines recommend. In Los Angeles, Romina Puga, ABC News.
That $484 billion spending package now goes to the House. They could vote on it as early as Thursday. And we're also hearing tonight from White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett. He says there might be a third relief package on the way. Kim?
Yeah, much needed by those small businesses. Thank you, Steve. It was the deadliest day yet for the number of COVID-19 cases reported in San Diego County. Today, 15 new deaths bring the local death toll to 87. To date, we've had 2,434 cases, and that includes 109 new cases from yesterday, the most in 2 weeks. New tonight, National City is now making it mandatory for all residents to wear face coverings when they leave their homes. The emergency ordinance goes into effect at midnight. San Diego County's deadliest day comes as calls to reopen grow louder. 10 News reporter Anthony Pura shows us what to expect going forward.
San Diego County leaders announcing grim numbers at their Tuesday news conference. 15 new deaths from coronavirus. All but one of the cases involved underlying health conditions.
We're not out of this.
Deborah Mosheri is someone with underlying conditions too. She is more vulnerable to the virus.
I have probably gone into a medical clinic at least 6 times in the last 2 weeks for certain things that I need.
And she wants people to remember about those at risk like her, but also all the medical workers that risked their health and their family's health during this pandemic.
And I think that we need to do it not only for each other, but for those on the front line. I think they're getting forgotten now with all this wave of let's reopen.
Over the weekend, rallies took place, people frustrated over the stay-at-home order. On Tuesday, the city of San Diego reopening some of its parks at a limited capacity, outlining strict social distancing rules for users.
It's nice to have the option to go out and get to use these parks responsibly.
The county says the state and federal governments have given certain indicators before they can begin reopening. It includes seeing a 14-day downward trend of COVID-19 cases, but that's not something they're really seeing.
It's erratic at best, and some might say it's level, but it's not moving in the right direction.
However, the county is looking towards the future, saying they will again reevaluate the situation next week.
We will determine next week what, if anything, that we can do in terms of dialing down.
Anthony Pura, 10 News.
County leaders voted down a proposal today that would have allowed some businesses to reopen next week. The plan was pitched by North County Supervisors Kristen Gaspar and Jim Desmond. They wanted parks, beaches, and golf courses to open May 1st. Criteria would have been met to allow restaurants, gyms, and hair salons to reopen as well. The other supervisors felt reopening needs to be based on meeting federal health metrics and not a date on the calendar.
It's not going to happen all at once. We will reopen in phases, and we will hopefully soon ease our public health order allowing people to use parks, trails, and golf courses, but with restrictions. To paraphrase the Surgeon General, reopening will not be a light switch, but more like a sunrise. But how soon that happens is really up to each and every one of us.
The county is working on a plan to ease restrictions at parks and beaches in the coming weeks. And the city has now moved nearly 1,000 homeless people into the San Diego Convention Center. And now Mayor Kevin Faulconer is calling on landlords to step up and rent their units as part of the Shelter to Home program.
So landlords, here's what you need to know about the LEAP program, Landlord Engagement and Assistance Program. We have incentives of $500 for the first unit rented to a homeless individual, up to 2 times rent in security deposits, plus an average of $100 in utility assistance per household. A contingency fund that'll help landlords cover expenses, such as repairs that may exceed security deposits.
But the mayor also announced today 3 more San Diego police officers have tested positive for COVID-19. Well, this afternoon, President Trump spoke about his decision to suspend immigration in response to the coronavirus crisis.
By pausing immigration, we'll help put unemployed Americans first in line for jobs as America reopens. So important. It would be wrong and unjust for Americans laid off by the virus to be replaced with new immigrant labor flown in from abroad.
The suspension will be in effect for at least 60 days and only apply to those seeking permanent residency. The Navy is preparing to release the findings of the investigation that got the captain of the USS Theodore Roosevelt fired from his command. Well, the aircraft carrier is home ported in San Diego. Last month, a letter from Captain Brett Crozier describing a coronavirus outbreak on the ship leaked to the San Francisco Chronicle. More than 700 service members from the Roosevelt have now tested positive. Crozier was fired by the former Navy Secretary for failing to take the steps necessary to make sure that his letter wouldn't leak. And depending on the investigation, Crozier could be reinstated. 320,000 adults in LA County alone may have been infected with coronavirus. That is the finding of a new study out of USC. And that would mean that the illness is far more widespread than current testing shows, and the death rate is much lower. The researchers found about 4% of the county's 8 million adults have antibodies to the virus. Many were silent carriers. And officially, there have been about 15,000 cases in LA. The director of the CDC says a second, potentially worse wave of the coronavirus could hit this winter. He told the Washington Post that's because we'll be in the middle of flu season, which would put even more strain on our healthcare system. Dr. Deborah Birx on President Trump's coronavirus task force said today she hopes if there is a second wave, we'll catch it early and we will manage it. And the U.S. is monitoring intelligence that North Korea's leader is in grave danger after undergoing surgery. Kim Jong-un recently missed the celebration of his deceased grandfather's birthday on April 15th. He was seen 4 days before at a government meeting. The rumors of his declining health began when a South Korean website claimed that Kim underwent cardiovascular surgery and suffered complications. But South Korea quickly disputed those reports. If you're hoping to get a tax break for your new home office, you may be out of luck. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2018 eliminated write-offs for business expenses that companies don't reimburse. But you may be eligible if you're self-employed. You can also take a percentage of your home expenses as a business expense, but you'll have to pay taxes on it if you sell your house.